Hey, job orders. So Alec Barrett Wilson is from Sourcestack, sourcestack.co, and they scrape jobs among other data services. And he's here today to give us a quick demo of it. If you're looking for backfill, this is one of the options out there. So, hey, Alec, how's it going?
Not too poorly. Excited to show you all how our job backfill works.
Yep. Are you the founder of Sourcestack, or what's your background?
Yep. Founder and CEO.
Okay. And how'd you get into this business?
Goodness. A number of years ago, I worked as an investor in early stage SaaS companies. And part of that was helping them try to figure out how do we find customers when we don't know what they look like. So during that period, I started doing a lot of kind of ad hoc data scraping, trying to understand, how do you take this qualitative idea of what a customer looks like and turn that into actual rows of data, companies you can go talk to. Just about 3 years ago now, started the company Sourcestack, which was initially focused on sort of company data broadly, things like what software products are they using, what category of company are they. But a learning that we found and we kept coming back to is that people were more interested in consuming hiring data, these open job posts. What do people have need to fill currently? What types of software do they talk about when they're hiring? So the business has sort of been pulled in that direction over the past 3 years. And now it's our biggest kind of product line and our sort of focus for the future, I would say.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, I get emails from people saying, hey, do you want a list of, iSIMS users or Workday users, things like that? So you do that as well?
Yeah, I mean, we support, probably 50 plus now, tracking the ATS that companies use. But, particularly for job boards themselves, that's something that we've been pursuing quite a bit.
Gotcha. All right, well, go ahead and share your screen and show us a little bit about Sourcestack here.
Great. So just going to hop on over quickly to our web application. We have an API for folks who prefer to consume it in that way, but I think for a lot of folks, the place they get started is our web app. So we have
DIY solution, right?
Yes. We give folks the tools to sort of filter the type of data they want, and then they just pay for the data that they consume. We are not a software provider. We just sell data. We are not a services provider. But, over the years, we've gotten very good at giving folks the tools to sort of filter down to the data that's actually useful to them. Most job boards don't want, here's 100,000 engineering roles. They want, here's the 2,000 roles that are in California and using Kubernetes or something like that. So the way that we think about this is how much of our filtering logic can we move forward and let people use on their own and only charge people when they're actually consuming data. So if folks say, hey, I have a strong conviction of what I want to consume, the type of data that's relevant to my board, we can support that quite well. And in a lot of cases, very cost effectively as well. So I'll run through just a brief example here. I'm happy to open it up to questions afterwards. So I would say for most folks, the place that they start is, hey, I want to filter on what's the name of the job. So maybe we can just say engineers broadly, which is going to contain structural engineers, software engineers, a big amalgam of different roles. And for this, I'm just going to pull how many records does Sourcestack currently have of active jobs that match this description. In this case, it's about 76,000 engineering roles. This is something that we allow customers to do for free. For any filter, you can just say, hey, I want to know how many records you have for that. And then after that, I will decide if I actually want those records. So let's filter this down a little bit more. Maybe we want to be in the United States and Canada. And maybe we have a job board that's specific to certain technologies. I've seen a lot of folks who have, a newsletter that writes about, here are new Kubernetes offerings. And one of the things they realize is, hey, a job board is a great way to monetize this built-in audience I have. But it's very difficult to find Kubernetes roles, as an example, scalably. Like you're going to be stuck with a lot of operational work trying to collect emails from people and scour around the web yourself. So in this case, we can make this quite a bit easier by saying, all right, let's just look for roles that have Kubernetes mentioned in them. Or maybe we expand it a little bit and we include EKS is AWS's Kubernetes offering. GKE is Google's Kubernetes offering. Let's see what that takes us down to. I've already messed up my own example.
Use the field called tech_. Use what is that field? I don't know that.
So we parse out over 8,000 different softwares. So you can say, hey, I want job posts that mention these softwares. And then you can filter down to only include those. So if you're working with, our board niche is these softwares or these types of softwares, or maybe just a certain category of roles that tend to use similar softwares. That's something you can do up front. And in this case, we have about 2,000 currently active roles that match all these descriptions. So for a lot of boards, 2,000 active jobs, let's say per month, is a great volume, and you can start to move some pretty meaningful amount of applicant traffic on the back of that. But before I dive into that thought, let me just walk through sort of what this data looks like more specifically. So if we deselect this count option, we can look quickly at what does this data look like. We have some default fields here, things like, is this a full-time role? Is this a senior role? Is this a remote role? What's the company's name? What's the company's website? Things like this. We have public documentation on all of the data fields that we support. I won't go through it all because I think we have about 60 fields as of present, but it's on our website for folks who want to take a look at it. And something that I think job board customers find valuable is that we have a lot of that parsing done up front. So if their job board has a notion of this is a senior role, this is a remote role, they don't have to do that parsing themselves. They can pull from Sourcestack to say, hey, let's just take your remote field and push it directly into our board's front end. That way there are no manual steps in the middle. You're just sort of filling the board every time you need more data. I'll expand this a little bit to say, hey, let's look at this in a format that I think most people find a little bit easier to use, which is Google Sheets. Typically when I onboard a new job board, this is a great place to start to just look through the data a bit more broadly and see, does this match what I thought it would? Are there records in here that don't feel like they should be? In some cases, you have overlap of job names between industries. So we work with a job board for architects, and a relatively common role now is software architect, which is not related to the field of architecture. So working through this initially helps define what are the filters that we should add to avoid those showing up in the future. And I'll sort of scroll briefly through this here, but this is an example of the jobs that match that description.
Is the full job description in there?
So our default fields don't include it, but you can. We have a shortened version, which is just job description. And then we have the post's full text. So a literal transcription of all of the text that's in the job post. And we also support a field called post HTML, where we're stripping out all of the style, but you still have the structure of the post as it was. So you can take that post HTML and just immediately repost it onto your site and style it according to the way that your
that's
job
the way
board looks.
Most job boards would want it. They want that full listing. And
yeah, so that's something that we can provide as well. I can demo that in just a second, but that's sort of how I would think about initially, just how do we look at and qualify that this data makes sense and matches our expectations. Yep. After that, say, for example, our board, the best way to ingest new posts is an XML feed. That's something that we can provide as well.
Most job board softwares will let you either upload a file, CSV file jobs, or the other way they do it is through the auto import off of the URL. That URL is kind of a public URL that it can see on a daily basis, so you can scrape it each night.
Yeah, so sorry, my example is a little bit off here, but to your point, that's something that we can support well. We have a native export to CSV, and then we have this XML link, which in a browser doesn't work super well because it just immediately downloads. But when you have a job board software reading from that URL, it can import fine. I've just done sort of a poor job of demonstrating it visually. Anyhow, this is an example of what this might look like. You can see here we've got Some standard job fields included, the URL, the company's URL, things like, is it a remote job? We've broken out all of the softwares that we've identified in the job itself. So some job boards like to highlight, hey, if you're looking for these types of softwares, we can show you in each post what they actually have. You don't have to scan the whole thing yourself. And, you know, there are, to my point, a lot of job fields. Not all of them will be relevant for each board, but we give you the ability to say, hey, these are the ones that are. Let me pull that each time I'm receiving data.
And do you have other jobs like tech jobs?
Sorry, say it again.
Do you have other jobs in the database besides tech jobs?
Yes. Suppose my examples are weighted in that direction, but
like,
so
do you have remote? Let me ask you, do you have remote HR jobs?
Yeah. So
how would you do that?
Let's go through that example as well. This is looking at specifically, does the title contain human resources?
Yes.
You know, if we add contains HR, I think it's going to be substantially longer. But in this case, we have about 100 that are currently active. We can pull this up and briefly look through this here as well. But for some roles, it can be a little bit tricky to set up that initial logic because to say, hey, I want a job that contains HR in it means that you may be pulling posts that contain the letters H and R that aren't human resources roles. Yep. Yeah, so this gives you an example of what that would look like as well. Here we've got this breakout column for remote. We know all of these posts are said to be remote. The way that we parse remote tends to be a little bit conservative. When we see, for example, hybrid role, we will not label that as remote because by my understanding, most hybrid roles have an in-office component. So in some senses, our remote data is a little bit lower than it should be, but that is something that you can filter on if you'd like.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yep.
So that's a brief overview of what that looks like. Ultimately, each board kind of discovers what the right fit looks like after a little bit of ideation. But boards that we work with tend to get set up same day, barring technical complexity if they have a one-off built board, which tends to be pretty rare. Currently, we have an integration with the job board software Trackit, and we're adding a couple new ones in coming months. But if you have a job board software that can import the CSV or can import from XML, this is something you can just get up and running with today.
Okay. What's the cost of this?
So our pricing is intentionally very transparent, and we think a lot about how do we align it in a way that makes sense with people's use. So when you buy from Sourcestack, you're buying data. You're buying a notion of a credit where a credit is just one job. And you can use those credits at whatever rate makes sense for your job board. If you have a job board where you want 1,000 up-to-date posts once a month, then our startup package is going to last you 100 months. You can come back in 8 years to renew if you feel like it's still a good value. But in that case, we can be extremely cost effective. I mean, you're looking at an effective cost, $2 a month to have 1,000 up-to-date jobs pulled in every month. So I think that is where we find the most value for folks. Is if you have a new board or you're struggling to get a lot of applicant traffic or you have a very specific niche, we can be quite helpful because when you look at backfill providers that do kind of CPC deals, those aren't oriented for those types of boards. They're looking for established boards with a lot of traffic. They're looking for kind of broad appeal boards where there will be a lot of volume and scale. We fit a little bit better with everybody else.
Yeah, I'd say so. And it's sourcestack.co, right?
Yes, that is correct.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate the demo and thanks a lot. And we'll get you up on the YouTube channel and get you rolling there soon.
Wonderful. I'm happy to talk through other parts of the business if you'd like, or I don't know. What else would be helpful to your audience?
Yeah, is there anything else you want to add?
A couple things that I would point, at least that are interesting for some, but probably not all boards, is The way that we think about filtering, I would describe as enables a type of job board that may not be possible otherwise. So say you have a very niche type of software that you want to build a board for, and you know that there's not a lot of posts out there. It would be very difficult to find a backfill provider who can support that out of the box. But that's something that in a lot of cases we can do from day one. Similarly, for folks who have a very unique definition of what the job they want to look like will be, we can give them the tools to do so. In some cases, we have job boards that filter on the full text of the post itself. So you're not looking at the name or the department. You're saying, I want specifically anywhere in the job post they have this phrase or these two phrases. And that allows them to get a slice of jobs data that would otherwise be very hard to do automatically.
Yeah, the main problem I have with those, the other feeds is that most times I'm looking just for the job title stuff, but they tend to, it doesn't work always that way. I always get stuff that's not in the job title in those feeds for some reason.
Oh, like they're having problems with the hygiene of the job name?
Yeah, I'll tell them, just give me, recruiting jobs, and you'll end up seeing, a nurse job in there somehow. I don't know, because I don't know how they filter properly, but I've had issues with just feeds getting created like that in the past.
So. It's curious. Yeah, I've certainly heard customers complain about, with other data vendors, you have this abstracted logic of how this is filtered or how these jobs are coming to be given to you. You have a hard time doing quality control. And if you're building a job board, your brand is behind it. What you're offering is not just here are some jobs, but we stand behind that they are relevant and timely and interesting to our audience. That's something I think we can be, I suppose, a little more helpful than average. But beyond that, a couple other things I'll note. We've seen boards have good results with structured fields that they can pull from Sourcestack. So to say, hey, this is a senior manager type of role. Hey, this is a contract role. This is a remote role. This is a role that's based in one of these 20 countries. So we can say that it's, an example might be the European Union. So the European Union role. We can provide that out of the box, and you can pull that onto your board and use it to build, for example, badges. So folks can more readily identify what are the things that are most relevant to me. And this can help drive a little bit better kind of applicant activity on boards.
Good stuff, man. Yeah, I'd love to get like that HR feed if I could. At least I guess you free one, yeah.
I'll set you up with that
like
shortly.
Just US job, so it's probably lower than 115, but
something I can do for you, and I sort of colloquially offer to folks when they become customers, is if your initial filter doesn't have a lot of volume, we can do job title expansion. We have an internal tool that says, hey, based on this job title, these other ones are probably also relevant. So we can pull in some similar ones. I'll send you that. You can take a look and say, hey, maybe this isn't what I'm looking for. But even if the initial results aren't a huge sample size, that doesn't mean that we can't find.
As long as I get a few dozen, that'd be great. Just to add to my site. So
yeah, that's something we can support. So for readers of job board secrets, Sourcestack is happy to offer a exclusive free trial. So you can look at the data, you can pull it onto your job board and decide whether or not it makes sense to become a customer. Just send an email to redeem@sourcestack.co and mention job board secrets. We'll set you up with 2,000 jobs for free. You can use them at any rate that you want, and you can do effectively anything that you want with the data, although technically you can't resell it.
Good stuff, man. Yeah, send that over to me as well, the other stuff.
Happy to. Gosh, I'm trying to think what else I've forgotten here, since I know every time I do a demo, I forget at least one thing. Something I've seen a couple job boards that we work with do, that not everyone, but once you have enough volume to start thinking about sponsored job posts, since we have a separate companies data set, customers can pull in context on the companies that have posted jobs that they're pulling from us. So if you say, hey, I've already got 7 jobs from Activision Blizzard, how many other jobs do they have total? Who are the people that I should be talking to for, hey, do you want to sponsor a job on my board? So it makes it a little bit easier to go find those sponsors and to expand that reach. And in many cases, you can say to them, hey, we've already loaded your jobs, click here to sponsor them, and make it a lot less painful for the folks who make those decisions to actually write that check.
Right. That's cool. I like that.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think that's just about everything I have. I guess one more thing, which I'll mention just for the sake of posterity, is we intend to be a very transparent business. And in looking at companies that offer similar services, I see a pretty distinct lack of that. So, we have pricing available on our website. We charge exclusively on usage, and we have an up-to-date change log of all of the updates that we've made. So folks can go through and scroll and say, hey, what has Sourcestack done in the last 3 years? That's something that we will continue to do, most likely forever, because we think it's important. When you're pulling data from a company, when you build that relationship, you should trust that, hey, they're going to act in my interests, or at least I'll understand what their interests are if we're going to be working together for a while.
Well, noted. Definitely. That's good to know.